You just went for a walk. Shh, the baby's asleep. Oh. Hey, long time no see. A lot's changed in the past month, and there's probably too much to tell you about right now, but suffice it to say, I have a baby, and it's been quite an amazing past month. Words can't really describe it. If you have a child, you know the trials, tribulations, and joys that come with being a parent, but I mean, I'm sure you're curious what he looks like, and you want to also have another new console log show him as well. So, I mean, without further ado, without dwelling on it any further, I want to show you my brand new baby, a new episode of the console log. Let's get this show started. I'm not looking forward to cleaning that up. Okay, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the console log, the first one in 5 weeks. Thank you for sticking with this because I dearly needed this break to spend some time to bond with my new son. It's been an incredible past couple of weeks, but I could talk forever about being a new parent, so let me just go back to what you're here for, which is the console log. So this is now episode 34. This is the weeks of April 2nd all the way up till today, May 6th. So that is a whole month's worth of news that I am ready to share with you. And it was hard. Oh my God, there was so many. You think news and politics moves fast? I bet that JavaScript news moves even faster. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't care, I still enjoy talking about it. But I spent most of yesterday, for all you fine folks out there, figuring out which were the highlights from this past month of news. I'm very happy that I only do this as a weekly show because to actually try to cram and collate and curate a month of news is just way too much work. This is definitely gonna be a longer episode, so sit back, relax, get some popcorn if you want, or maybe a nice cup of coffee, because as us programmers like to do, we do like to have our caffeine intake. And let's begin this show now. So the first thing that you should be aware about is that the world of NPM had a lot of new things happen this past month. So the first thing that the NPM team shared was a very large blog post summarizing all the things that happened the past week in the world of NPM. And it was a lot of things that happened in the world of NPM. The big thing that happened is that the NPM 5.x series came out, and the big feature of that, which the NPM team is very proud of, rightfully so, is that NPM is now between 4 and 17 times faster than NPM 4, which is so needed because who wants to spend time waiting for your node modules to install? Another thing that this blog post called out is this new utility called npx, which is a way to run CLI code easier. So if you, for example, want to install Prettier as a dev dependency in your node modules, you can now easily run Prettier via npx Prettier. And npx will do one of two things. It'll look to see if you have Prettier installed in your local node modules. And if it isn't, it'll actually go out into NPM and actually grab Prettier and install it as a one-time op to actually run it locally. So it makes using CLIs with NPM a lot easier. So that's a feature that if you haven't used before, I definitely encourage you to try out. Another great feature that happened in NPM 5.7 is NPM CI, which is a way to install your node modules that is geared towards a CI interface. And the best feature about NPM CI is that it is really fast. If you haven't tried it yet so far, just try running it in your local node project and just running npm CI, and you'll see how much faster it is compared to npm install. It is an awesome feature. What else happened this past month is that the latest version in the 5.x branch came out, so npm 5.10.0 came out, so awesome, you have now the latest and greatest from the npm 5.x series. But what's even more exciting than npm 5 is that the npm team announced npm 6. And the NPM team is now moving with a much faster iteration speed, which is awesome to see because it is a tool that we use so many times throughout the day, and having it be as fast as it can is always a great thing to see. One of the big new features that they're touting in NPM 6 is greater stability with NPM installs using the package-lock.json file, which means that right now when you do NPM install in the 5.x series, sometimes you'll have the package-lock.json file change, and that's due to discrepancies between different operating systems, different versions, different SHA configurations, and I think they've done an effort to actually make that less different across different coworkers' machines, such that if you have a package lock file and everyone is using the same version of NPM, then you should have the same installation installed. They promised that with NPM 5, but there was a lot of bugs they had to work out to actually make that there. It seems to be now re-promised in NPM 6. I haven't tried it out myself, but I am curious because that is a big pain point that I have at work. Another subtle but actually big change, in my opinion, that they're doing in NPM 6 is they're changing the default behavior of NPM install. In the past, when you wanted to add a new NPM package to your Node project, you'd have to actually do npm install --save to actually have that written to your package.json file. And if you didn't remember to do --save or --save dev, it would just be installed locally and it would not persist your package.json file. Well, no more, because in NPM 6, the new default behavior is to actually update your package.json file, which is awesome to see because 9 times out of 10, you actually do want to save that to your package.json file. And it makes sense that they waited for NPM 6 to make this change, because that is a major breaking change, albeit one that I think will be most welcome across the community at large. And one last thing that the NPM team blogged about was beyond NPM 6. Man, they are on a roll, just pushing out NPM 5, NPM 6, and they're already talking about NPM 7 and 8. And what's actually great about this blog post is some of the promises of features, desires of features they're looking to implement after NPM 6, and some of the big features that they're talking about in this blog post, which I'm really excited about. The first one is a rewrite of NPM link. If you ever had to develop your own NPM package, you know that NPM link can be kind of wonky and not really reliable, so they're going to rework that to make it better for developers. A big thing is they're going to integrate the functionality of shrinkwrap into NPM directly, so that you can actually have offline deploys without a cache, which is great because if you're on an airplane, you want to work on a project, you got no internet. And last but not least, the biggest feature that I'm looking forward to having be included directly into NPM is support for workspaces. And this is the biggest feature that Yarn, the competitor to NPM, has over NPM, is the ability to actually have support to work with monorepos. And that's when you have one Git repository, but multiple NPM packages in that Git repository. Right now, if you want to do that, there's this tool called Lerna, which is a way to use and manage a monorepo, but it seems like the NPM team is saying that they actually want to add that directly into NPM itself, and that is going to be a welcome, and so desired change. I will use that alpha as soon as it comes out because I want to try it out right now. Bear with me, I know I've been talking a lot about news, but I have my most exciting piece of news at the end, so if you stick around till the end, you'll learn all about something that will, I think, change the landscape of CSS as we know it. So stick with me because I know this is a lot of news, but it's been a month of news to catch up on, but at the end, that last thing, it's gonna be so good. Okay, so that was a lot of NPM news, but let's now stay in the world of Node and NPM and talk about how Node version 10.0 came out. How did I miss that in the past month? A whole new integer for Node. Oh, it's so nice to see. And actually a cool thing about Node 10, not in the initial release, but in a new 10.x release, it will actually bundle NPM 6 with it by default. So that's coming later, not now, because NPM 6 is not final yet, but a later version of NPM Node 10 will include NPM 6 by default. And the big thing about Node 10, which I'm so excited about, is that it is the latest branch that will be a LTS branch, which stands for long time support, which means that for large companies that actually rely on Node daily, it's a good idea to stay on LTS branches. And that was Node 4, that was Node 6, Node 8, and now it's Node 10. And the features that are coming in Node 10 is going to be a lovely LTS branch to sit on for the length of that duration of its support. Also to be noted is that the oldest LTS branch, the first LTS branch, the Node 4.x branch, is officially going to be end of life on April 30th. So that actually already happened. So that means if you're still using Node 4, it is not getting any more updates anymore. No security, no features, like no bug fixes, nothing. So it is high time for you to move on from Node 4 if you are still using that. So let me tell you about some of my favorite new features of Node 10. The REPL, the Node REPL, now experimentally supports top-level await syntax when using an additional flag with Node. So that means if you actually want to drop into the REPL and just kind of play around with some async code, you can use the -- experimental-repl-await flag to actually just write into the REPL await ajax.get to make a AJAX request, and it'll just wait in there without having to actually add an extra function to declare that as async. So that's another small but very large usability improvement in Node 10. And speaking of async and promises, there is a new experimental API for the file system package in Node. Wherein before, if you wanted to actually do like fs.readFile, you had two different ways to do that. You could do fs.readFile, which is an async process. You're given a callback to be notified when the async process was done. You could do fs.readSync to actually read it synchronously and block that event loop. And now there is a new experimental, and hopefully it will be adopted in full, promise API for the file system. So you can import this promise API via require fs/promises to access this new API. Then you get back this fs/promises object that you have the same methods that you would for the callback version of the file system API. So you can actually now write fs/promises.readFile, and what you're given back is a promise. And that is a great way to see Node start moving with the community to actually have promises, which is now supported by default for a while, to actually be a top-level API that you can now use in Node. And I think probably the most exciting thing about Node 10, well, not most exciting, but one of the most exciting things I'm excited about in Node 10 is that it comes with Google's V8's version 6.6. And what's really cool about that is the current stable version of Google Chrome is Chrome 66, and it is also using V8 6.6, which means that the current version of Chrome is using the same V8 engine as the latest version of Node 10 is using as well. So you have that same V8 engine powering both those two versions of JavaScript, which means that you have all the JavaScript features that are in that V8 version available for you in Node 10 as well, which means that you have the ability to use promise.finally in Node 10, async generators, which is going to be great for Node code, async iterators. You can use the prototype methods trim start, trim end, because I always want to trim empty white space in my strings. And I think also what will be great for usability in Node 10 projects is the ability to optionally use the argument given to a catch expression. So when you use try catch right now, you are required to pass an error object into that catch handler, but there is no longer the requirement for that in Node 10 with V8 6.6. You can just do try catch and just ignore the E. So that's Node 10. That was NPM 5, 6, 7, Node 10. That will include NPM 6. Big things happening in the Node NPM world. Very cool. I don't know how they'll do it in a month. I'm kidding. I'm sure it was months of hard work. I'm just telling you about it now after reading about it in a month. But very, very, very cool. So let's talk about some other things you want to be aware about in the past month that happened. To use Redux, the state management tool for most React applications out there and also for other frameworks as well, but they had a major release this past week. Redux went 4.0 final. Ain't that cool? And the coolest thing about Redux 4.0 final is that not much changed. Redux is a pretty stable library, and the biggest change to Redux 4 was mostly TypeScript typings, so that you can actually have better integration of using Redux with TypeScript itself. There's a few under the hood changes, a few breaking changes that should only affect you if you've been using Redux in a way that they don't say that you should. For example, if you try to call get state or subscribe while dispatching, Redux will now throw, so it'll help you out to make less mistakes in your application code. You should be able to upgrade to Redux 4 without any issues, and it's always an exciting day when you can actually bump a major version in your package.json file. Okay, here's a crazy release that I did not expect to ever see happen. When I saw this happen, my jaw literally dropped to the floor. I had to pick it up, clean it off, and then npm install it back into my jaw. But there was a new version of underscore was released this past month, version 1.9.0. What? The last version of underscore that was released was, not joking, over 3 years ago. Underscore 1.9 came out April 18th this past year. The last version came out April 2nd, 2015. Where were you in 2015? Was JavaScript even a language in 2015? Doesn't matter. It's out. There's there's a few things that were added. The thing that I'm most excited about underscore 1.9 is that when you have a throttle or debounce function created, there's now a way to cancel it. So if you had a debounce and you have a React component and you want to debounce that stuff, when you're unmounting that component, you can now cancel any timeout that was there to prevent any errors that you might have. That's been in master for 3 years, so now that it's actually published, I can use that, thank goodness. If you use Lodash, you already had that functionality, but it's great to see that underscore is still semi-maintained. When's the next release going to be? 4 years? I don't know. I don't mean to be harsh on it. It's just a little while that it took 3 years for these things to get out. But I will not look a git horse in the mouth because if I was a donkey, then I'd be a jackass, and then I'd be a horse that said nay. Yep, that sounds about right. Okay, we're almost at the end. Glad you're sticking with me. Do you use Sass? Because big news this past month is that the implementation of the Sass language that has they've been rewriting the Sass language in Dart. The creator of Sass was on the Dart team and decided to actually rewrite this Sass language in Dart for a host of reasons, I'm sure. And the Dart Sass version went 1.0 final this past month, which means that it is now in feature parity with Ruby Sass and all the other implementations of Sass. And that's awesome because Dart's probably a little bit more usable in the JavaScript world because you can actually compile Dart code to JavaScript code, which means that Dart Sass is distributed in multiple ways. One is as a binary that includes the Dart VM. It says that's the fastest way to use that. You can use that with you can install that by a brew install. But also they've compiled the Dart version to JavaScript, and you can actually use that as a plain old NPM package, just as JavaScript, which means that integrating Sass into your JavaScript projects now it's now easier than ever. You can actually just do npm install whatever the package name is, and then just use it in your package via the API. So that's really cool. The sad thing from all of this is that Ruby Sass is going to be deprecated, and after March 26, 2019, so next year, it will no longer be maintained. The current maintained version will only be Dart Sass. And also a very cool thing, very exciting thing for the world of open source work is that the creator of Sass is now able to work on Sass full time, which means that Sass can now go full steam ahead. I currently use less in my projects, and that was mostly because it was written in JavaScript. But now that Sass is now using Dart, which is closer to JavaScript, it's still its own thing. It's a little bit easier to use in JavaScript applications. So that's very cool to see that Sass, big change from that. And last, but certainly not least, the thing that I actually am most excited about in this past month of news, so many things happen, but this thing I'm most excited about is the release of this thing called CSS blocks. I am so excited about this release. It's written by engineers at LinkedIn, and they're trying to figure out how to make their homepage, their home feed, their news feed faster, trying to figure out how to reduce their CSS load. And it's really, 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 really cool. I'm really excited about it. It says on the homepage it's inspired by CSS modules, BEM, Atomic CSS, and I believe all of that. The idea of CSS blocks, in the simplest terms as possible, is you have CSS. Okay, so you have your template, whether it's in a template file with handlebars or with JSX, and you have your CSS, which is like class names. The most decoupled version of doing that is you have your template and your CSS, you have a class name, you write it in there as well. There is a improvement to that called CSS modules, where you can actually write your CSS file, .css file, so you have like .foo, and in your template file you can actually import that CSS file directly. So you can like import styles.css, and you get back an object where you can actually directly use those class names as properties on an object in your template. And that's cool as well. However, there's still, it relies on a little bit more human interaction because you have to import it, use it directly, and there's no way of knowing if you're actually using all the things that are defined in there. Like if you have .foo.bar and you're only using .foo over here, there's no way for your application to know that you're not using .bar. And that's kind of the amazing thing about CSS blocks, is that it supports static analysis of your CSS. And that is the most wild thing I have ever heard about. CSS, this wild west of style sheets and cascades and global effects and stuff like that, thought to be unmanageable. CSS blocks has created a system that allows you to actually statically analyze your CSS to see with certainty if your CSS will not, or might, under certain conditions, be used in your template file. So you have .foo.bar, and you're using .foo here. When the CSS box is compiled and transformed, it'll actually exclude .bar from your resulting CSS file. So it'll just reduce your CSS file and not use it at all. Additionally, other things that it does amazing transformations to reduce your CSS file. If you have .foo red, and both have like, you know, border one pixel red in both properties in both things, it'll actually pull that single property, that border property, into a different class name, like, you know, .border, and it'll additionally include that in your template to again reduce the size and effect of your CSS file. And it does all of this while also maintaining the cascade that you would expect in your CSS files. There is so much amazing things going on here. I'm so excited about this. I want to try around with it so badly. I think having another episode just dedicated just to CSS box is definitely worth everyone's time because it looks really cool. This could definitely be a evolution, a huge, like even more so than CSS and JS. Although I'm sure that CSS and JS will definitely adopt some of these ideas to bring it back to there, but this is just, oh my God, where have you been all my life? Where? Okay, that was your month of news. Do you feel educated? Do you feel tired? Because I feel all those things. There are so many things that I could not include this past month that I wish I could if I had a whole hour to talk about these things, which I do not have. Things about how service workers is now supported in Edge. Houdini has additional support in Google Canary. React 16.3.2 came out. Prettier 1.12 came out. VS Code had 2 releases in the past month that I was gone. 1.2.2, 1.2.3. So many things. But you can read all about those extra links on the console log website. I have an overflow section where you can just see all the links that didn't make it into this cut, but things that I actually collected and are still interesting, but not enough to actually include in the video itself. Thank you so much for being a subscriber. It means so much for me to have you here. I'm still getting back to the swing of things, having a newborn child, so expect a little bit of rocky things while I get used to this new life of having 3 in an apartment instead of 2. And again, thank you for subscribing. If you're not already a subscriber, do subscribe. These videos will come at you every week, and you will enjoy every second of them. And if you don't, let me know why, and I will make sure that you do. So that is me signing off. I am hoarse. I am happy to be back, and I will see you again next week. Goodbye.